Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In today's lecture on symbolic expression, we have with us our expert, Ms. Manisha, who is going to translate the lecture in sign language. For the discussion of today, the topic is culture and society. Now, before we begin, let us first try to understand this term culture is very common. We often hear that you are cultured girl or if the culture is very good. It has different meaning in different context. What we are going to do today is understand the concept as used by sociologists and see what are the different terms which are associated with culture. So once we understand culture, we will be able to understand the relation between culture and society. So let us try to understand first what is culture. Now, in sociology, culture refers to the sum of human beings' life ways, their behavior, beliefs, feelings, thought, and it connotes everything. So, as I said, it's a complex term. It kind of means beliefs, norms, values, mores, folkways, customs, law, sanctions. So, there's a whole gamut of things that fall into culture. When we talk specifically of culture in relation to society, we understand that culture is a learned behavior. So we learn, and that is why we say you are a cultured person. So if you are able to imbibe the norms and values of a society in the way it is expected, then you have learned the culture of the society. Now, learning culture could be through different ways. It could be through experience, imitation, communication, concept, thinking, and socialization. So, generally, culture transfers from one generation to other. It could transfer through written tradition or through oral tradition. So we kind of many a time hear in common conversation that this is a particular belief that has carried on for few generations. So we are talking about the culture of that society. So it is transmitted in two ways. Number one, vertically, that is from grandfather to father to son. So it is vertically moving down from one generation to the other. Now culture also travels horizontally, that is from one community or society to another. So we kind of know that Indian society was impacted by the Western, and we kind of learned a lot of things which was happening in Western culture. So that is an instance of horizontal transmission. Now we've understood what is culture. Now the next important thing is that it is so common. Everybody is aware of what is culture. So the question is, why do sociologists study culture? Now to answer this, we know that sociology is a science of society. It tries to understand everyday life, every meaning which is in a context in a particular manner. So culture becomes important for sociologists because it plays an important role in the production of social order. So when we are talking about the functionalist perspective, culture becomes significant. How to maintain the order in society. And what is social order? It implies stability of society based on collective agreement. Collective agreement that everybody gives consent to a particular custom or a norm or a value of the society, and then it becomes a legitimate norm of the society. And a number of sociologists, since the inception of the discipline, have studied culture. To begin with, we know the French sociologist Émile Durkheim. He studied both the material and the non-material aspect of culture. Now, Durkheim was a functionalist. He wanted to understand the function of culture in maintaining the social integrity of the society. In other words, how society is held together by culture. So he felt or argued in his work that common values, beliefs, moral communication and practices provide us with a shared sense of purpose and valuable collective identity. So the collectivity, the sense of belonging to a group comes from the understanding of culture. The second sociologist, who is Karl Marx, he established a critical approach. Now, Karl Marx was studying the class-based society. His focus was to understand the economy as the source of exploitation and the emergence of capitalism leading to disability. So when he is talking about conflict approach, that two classes, those who own means of production and those who do not own means of production, they are in conflict with each other. It is in the realm of non-material culture. He is basically talking about economic resources. So it's the non-material realm. And therefore he argues that the non-material culture can be understood by looking into the class conflict between the two classes. He reasoned that subscribing the mainstream values, norms and beliefs, people invest in unequal social system that do not work in their best interest but rather benefit the powerful minority. So the upper class or the ruling class is a small section who are able to own means of production. Their culture becomes hegemonic and they kind of dominate the majority, and therefore, according to Karl Marx, culture is a force of both oppression and creativity. Now, when we look into definitions, which is very important for student of sociology, we know that there are number of definitions given by n number of sociologists, but some of them are important because it kind of gives us a good understanding of a sociological definition of culture. So the classical definition of culture came in from the 19th century anthropologist who is considered as the father of anthropology, that is Edward Bonnet Tyler. In the first paragraph of his book, Primitive Culture, published in 1871. Here, Tyler defines culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. So it is the entire kind of a lot of parts to the whole, which together forms the culture. The second definition of culture is from Kroeber. According to Kroeber, the mass of the learned and transmitted motor reaction, habits, techniques, ideas and values and behavior all together constitute culture. Another important anthropologist to have given us the definition of culture was Clifford Gates. In his work, The Interpretation of Culture, selected essay, published in 1973, which is kind of considered as a seminal text by anthropologists, he articulated a view of the role of culture in social life and how anthropologists should study culture. Culture, according to Clifford Gates, is a system of inherited conceptions expressed in symbolic forms by means of which men communicate, perpetuate and develop their knowledge about and attitude towards life. So here we can see that he is giving significance to the symbols and language as means of communication. How are culture or norms, values accepted by people? It is through symbols, it is through language. Now, when we look into Clifford Gates, he gives us the functions of culture, and that is to impose meaning on the world and make it understandable. So, for instance, any particular object might have multiple meaning. What is the task of culture? It kind of assigns the meaning to a particular culture, and then the society is known through those symbols. So if we kind of look into a Hindu society, the symbols of a married woman are kind of in terms of a number of jewelry or number of applications of certain color, which signifies a concept of the symbolic significance of a woman. Now, another important contemporary sociologist, philosopher, who has given us the concept of culture is Pierre Bourdieu. Now, Pierre Bourdieu sees power as culturally and symbolically created and constantly re-legitimized through an interplay of agency and structure. The main way this happens is through what he calls habitus. So, Pierre Bourdieu has given us the concept of habitus, which means socialized norms or tendency that guide behavior and thinking. So, every society has a habitus which includes certain norms, certain values which has been passed on through the generation through the process of socialization, and we integrate it into our lifestyle and we behave accordingly. So if you look into the habitus of again a Hindu society, after marriage the norm is to kind of move out from your parental house and stay with your in-laws house. So that becomes a socialized norm in terms of a Hindu society. Habitus is the way society becomes deposited in persons in the form of lasting disposition or trained capacity and structured to think, feel and act in certain determined ways, which becomes the guiding principle. So, in a way, habitus tells us about the way of life, the way the society expects individual to live their life. Along with kind of defining the concept of habitus, Pierre Bourdieu gave an important concept which is cultural capital. Now, capital means money, monetary, and culture is both material and non-material. What does he mean by the term cultural capital? It means the ways by which it is created, culture is created and transferred from one generation to the other in the form of capital. So just as we kind of transfer our property or our inheritance to the young ones, we also transfer certain culture, and that culture, when retained by the next generation, becomes a source of earning. So the example that could be in terms of investing in education. Now, education is kind of a cultural capital of a large majority of Indians, middle class, who wants to improve the economic status. So they invest in education of their children, and then the children can grow up and earn economically better. That becomes the source of capital. According to Pierre Bourdieu, cultural capital plays an important role in power relation, as this provides the means for a known economic form of dominance and hierarchy. So as a class, distinguish them through taste. So it is the taste which differentiate or distinction between two different class. So if you are a from a middle class, your taste is towards educating the children, whereas could be people or members from the lower class, they do not have the same kind of taste. Now, the shift from material to cultural and symbolic forms of cultural is large extent what hides the causes of inequality. Now, we try to understand what is culture, why sociologists study culture, how sociologists have studied culture. This now enables us to understand the difference between culture and society. Now, what is society? Society is a system of interrelationships. Society is a network of people with their beliefs, with their values, with their norms. And all the members of the societies are united through collective norms, collective values. So the societies are united by the fact that members are organized in a structured social relationship. And every structured social relationship has a unique culture. No culture could exist without societies, but equally, no society could exist without culture. So, without culture, we would not be human at all. And if we kind of understand sociology or society, the basic difference between human beings and animal is the culture, the development of collectively recognized, accepted values, norms and belief. So that helps us to understand the relationship between culture and society. Now, we have been talking about two types of culture, material culture and non-material culture. So, what is material culture? Material culture refers to objects or belonging of a group of people. So, material culture would be your property, it could be land, it could be the technology, the tools, machines, everything falls into the category of material culture. So, it is generally concerned with external, mechanical and utilitarian objects. Utilitarian in the sense that material culture is a source of livelihood, it is a source of earning, and that is why it has a utilitarian value. It can be easily communicated and makes our life more comfortable, luxurious and meaningful. So, the more we want to progress or want to have a more better culture, we invest in technology, we invest in these material culture to improve the standard of living of the society. Now, material culture has extrinsic values like housing, fashion, diet. So, they represent the apparatus of life or civilization. So, when we talk about the difference between two society at two point of time or space, we talk with reference to the difference in the material culture. It is progressive, it evolves. Now, when we talk about non-material culture, it consists of things which are non-monetary, that is does not have a utilitarian value. It kind of consists of expressive or symbolic values, and this would include ideas, attitude and beliefs of a society. It includes concepts, values, mores, folkways, everything. For instance, the value of monogamy, patriarchy, democracy, religious beliefs. So, these are all part of non-material culture. Now, the material and non-material culture are not kind of part apart. They are related to each other. They are linked because we kind of attach a symbolic meaning to the material culture. So, it is kind of very difficult to differentiate between the two. An example would be a metro pass is a material object, but it represents a form of non-material culture as well, because it is symbolic of capitalism. It is symbolic of the acceptance of an urban mode of transportation, and it also kind of tells us that there is a particular class that can have access to it. So, both at the same time, it is referring to material and non-material culture. Another concept which is very significant is to understand cultural universal. Now, universal means something which is found uniformly in all society. So, universals are certain elements of culture which are found in the society across the globe. So, it could be certain trait, cultural patterns, cultural behavior which is found in, say, in India, and it could be as well be found in the US. So, one example of cultural universal is the family unit. So, every society, whether it be the early society or it could be advanced technological industrial society, the family is the basic unit of society in every period and space, and therefore it is considered as a functional universal with certain roles, which is it regulates sexual reproduction, care of the child, it kind of also takes care of the economic, social and emotional needs of the members. Feminists have kind of given us a critical understanding of family. For feminists, family as a unit is also the place where we nurture inequality. But the idea is that it is a trait which is found in all society. So, the way in which family is defined and how it functions is kind of different. So, it could be a joint family along the male line in a Indian Hindu society, and it could be kind of a group of women working together through matrilineal in other parts. So, many kind of forms and functions of family is found, but the basic unit in all society is the family. This helps us to understand the concept of cultural universal. Another anthropologist who talks about culture is George Murdoch. He kind of recognized cultural universal in his study of kinship. So, when the kinship as a discipline started, the idea was to recognize certain cultural universal which would help us to understand kinship pattern. And the role of George Murdoch as an anthropologist is significant. So, when we look into this, where there are other terms like cultural shock, cultural lag. So, these are terms which helps us to understand the change which is happening in society. Cultural shock is when there is a large scale change and a new culture replaces the old culture. There is an experience of disorientation. This refers to cultural shock. Cultural universal can also be understood in relation to cultural relativism. Now, universal means it's found in all society. Relativism means that it is relative to one particular society and not necessarily found in other society. Ruth Benedict, he kind of tells us that every society has a unique pattern of thought and action, and those could be not necessarily compared to other. In order to understand the society, cultural relativism has to be followed. So, we have a good understanding of what is culture, the way it has been studied by sociologists, and a number of concepts related with culture. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.